Hi, this is Callie Smith, spirituality writer and author of Cat's Dreams, which is book number 1 in my new series, The Sacred Grounds novels. I've actually never used my voice for anything like an audiobook before, so this is a big experiment, and I wanted to share it with you. If you want a sneak peek from chapter 1 to see whether you actually want to read Cat's Dreams, or if you've already read it and are curious to hear a reading by the author, either way, I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for listening, and without further ado, here's the beginning of Chapter 1 of Cat's Dreams. Clay Patten Press presents Chapter 1 of Cat's Dreams, a Sacred Grounds novel, Book 1, copyright 2022 by Callie J. Smith, and read by the author. Dedicated to my mother and father, with gratitude for their unending love and support. As in the night, when lightning flickers free and gives a glimpse of distant hill and tree, each flash of good discloses what will be. Brian Wren, When All Is Ended. Chapter 1. Waiting for someone, I turned back from the window to find Joanna watching me. Standing behind the counter, she tucked some straight collar-length black hair behind her ear and held my gaze. I shrugged and walked back to her, a cleaning cloth in one hand and a spray bottle in the other. "Not really," I said quietly, aware of the few customers still seated in the cafe. "I was watching someone with a snow brush. I still haven't figured out who's been clearing off my car." "Ah," she said with an immediate smile, "you've got your secret admirer." "Yeah, right," I said, laughing at that idea. Since the first snowfall of the season, I'd been finding my car cleared of snow. Though thrilled not to have to deal with it myself, I didn't know what to make of that anonymous help. I'd asked around and found no one who admitted to doing it. I rented an upstairs apartment in the building where I worked, so I could see a bit of the residential parking from our cafe windows. After some snow earlier, I'd glanced out these windows from time to time during my shift, wondering if my mystery helper would appear. As I'd wiped down tabletops a moment ago, a man with a snow brush had captured my attention. I'd moved to the window and followed him with my eyes. He'd only cleared his own car, though, and driven away. Joanna shrugged and returned to wiping down the counters around the register. Annoyed by the wisps of hair falling into my own eyes, I set down the cleaning supplies on a nearby table and redid the messy bun behind my head. I enjoyed these afternoons and the chance to pause with quiet cleaning tasks after a rush of customers. Cold and gray as January could be, bright afternoons like this one left me feeling glad. The sun lowered itself over a row of buildings across the street. Rays of light fell through our windows and across tabletops. It really was beautiful, all of it. In fact, I'd been thinking much of the day that I couldn't have felt happier with my workplace just then. The Sacred Grounds Coffee Company filled half the sanctuary of a repurposed church, now a mixed-use building of businesses and apartments. Normal glass had replaced stained glass in the lower level of windows which ran along one wall of our cafe. We had a well-lit space, and I spent workdays watching life pass by outside. I enjoyed watching lives pass through inside as well. Quirky, surprising, friendly, even downright odd. The personalities in and out of that front door never failed to entertain me. However, one man in particular seemed to entertain me the most. My favorite customer, Paul Miles, turned the moments following our afternoon rush into my favorite time of day. After business died down, I'd do as I was doing now. Wander through the seating area, spray each tabletop with cleaning solution and wipe it down. I'd work methodically, starting with tables nearest the register and moving out from there until the seating section on the other side of the counter came into view. Glancing up only a little, I'd check to see if Paul still sat at the table where he usually sat. He didn't come in every afternoon. He came in many afternoons, though, and lingered until after the rush. Today turned out to be one of those days, for there sat Paul. He wore a gray sweater over black trousers. Oblivious to the room, he stared intently at his laptop and jotted something down in the notebook beside it. I'd noticed that odd habit early on, that he used pen and paper beside his laptop. I knew I had no business feeling as happy as I felt to see Paul sitting there, but I couldn't help it. From the first afternoon he'd walked into Sacred Grounds, Paul had struck me. I didn't think him that much older than I, perhaps early 30s. He seemed mature, though, even if only because he gave the impression of having comfort in his own skin. Compact and athletic in build, he had brown hair so dark that I thought it black at first, and he had equally dark eyes that met our own eyes easily. He treated people around the cafe kindly and spoke playfully. He smiled more than anybody else I knew, in fact, and that smile felt contagious. I didn't know anything else about Paul Miles, but I found his presence joyful. I liked him a lot. Paul glanced up now, and I realized I'd been staring at him. I looked down quickly as my cheeks flushed, hating how easily they did that. Continuing to clean, I finished all but the tables in his section. I told myself I didn't want to disturb him and could leave that part of the job until later. Going back behind the counter, I rinsed out the cloth and washed my hands. "May I bother you for a refill?" a familiar voice asked from behind me. It was Paul. I hadn't heard him approach. I turned, and there he stood, watching me with those friendly eyes. They seemed to smile even before his mouth did. "Hey, Paul," I said, reaching for the cup he pushed across the counter for me. "No bother at all. Dark roast with room?" I asked, knowing his usual order, but making sure that he didn't want to change it. "That's it." I turned and filled the cup, then set it down to fasten on a fresh lid. I knew he must be watching me from behind and hoped he didn't see my hands shaking. I certainly noticed it. I always acted nervous around this man. It didn't surprise me, but I felt frustrated all the same to find myself having trouble simply putting a lid on a paper cup. How many times a day did I do this with absolutely no trouble at all? The lid finally snapped into place. I took a breath and turned around. "Here you go," I said, noticing that my voice shook a little too. As I gazed into Paul's face, I saw that his gray sweater accentuated some flecks of gray in his otherwise very dark brown hair. His eyes watched me, and I had the sense yet again that he noticed more than most people did. I couldn't have explained why I thought that, but I did, and I felt certain those observant eyes had seen everything. Not that I'd have traded Paul's observant eyes for the world, of course. "Thanks, Kat," he said. He shook a bit of his coffee and then commented, "Your after-lunch crowd gets busier and busier." He seemed to speak easily with everyone else, and I knew he must be trying to do that with me now as well. I wasn't making it easy for him, though. He was a striking man, and he had a way of striking me silent. I began, taking a breath and trying to think of something to say. "We do seem to be getting a lot busier after lunch." I searched my mind for something else to say about that. I thought of nothing, though. All I said was, "Not sure what's up with that." He shrugged and gave me another smile before turning and going back to his table. I stared into the empty space he'd left. I took a deep breath, wishing yet again that I could find a way to relax in the presence of Paul Miles. Glancing down at the counter, it took me a moment to see what sat right in front of me. A black gel ink pen. It sat near where Paul had been standing. Without thinking, I grabbed it, walked out, and stopped a couple of tables away from him. He stared at his laptop and jotted things down in the small notebook beside him, not seeming to notice me. I hesitated to interrupt him. He appeared so focused on whatever work he'd returned to, and besides, he'd clearly found a pen. "Hey, Paul," I said finally. I took a step closer and held out the pen to him. He looked up with surprise. Quickly, he pulled a corner of the laptop closer as if to block my view of the screen. I pretended not to notice what he'd done and only held the pen out a little further. "Did you leave the pen at the counter?" I asked. His eyes left me and rested on the pen. After a second, recognition spread across his face. He relaxed into another lovely smile. "I wondered where that went," he said, reaching for it. He took the pen and looked up again. "Thank you." "You're welcome," I said, feeling my cheeks flush again at the warmth of his smile. Still trying desperately to come up with something to say, I blurted out the first thing that came to me. I keep thinking you must be a writer. His eyebrows went up. Because of all the time I spend staring at a screen and typing absolutely nothing? He asked, smirking. No, I said quickly, though feeling myself relax a little. Because of your pen and paper. It's unusual, that's all. He looked down at his notebook. Amusement crossed his face. I wanted to be a writer when I was a kid, he said, looking up again. I don't know why I do this, though. Visual thinker, I guess. It's always helped to map things out on a page. Interesting, I said. And I really meant it, too, though I knew I couldn't have come up with a lamer comment. I get it, though, I added, about being a visual thinker. I like to sketch. Really? He asked. Yeah, I said, though before I could think of anything further to add, I became aware of how close I stood to him. It suddenly felt too close. Didn't mean to bother you, I said quickly, stepping back. Have a good day. You too, Kat, he said after me. Even his voice sounded gorgeous, I thought, as I walked away. I returned to the register thinking so much about his smile, his eyes, and his voice that I forgot to wonder what it was he didn't want me to see on his laptop screen. This has been a recording from Chapter 1 of Cat's Dreams, a Sacred Grounds novel, Book 1, published in 2022 by Clay Patten Press, written by Callie J. Smith, and read by the author. If you enjoyed this reading, I hope you'll read more by visiting my website at www.calliejsmith.net/books to purchase a full copy of Cat's Dreams. Thank you for listening.